recall the moments that truly left a mark on my soul, I gotta start with my family. Living with them was no walk in the park, let me tell you. Looking back, I see the
Yeah,
many. I
even
was just a
now it
youngin' back
reminds
then,
me
barely understanding the world around
a
me,
lot of
but I felt the weight
horrible
of all of it
memories,
on my
man.
shoulders. But I wasn't always down in the dumps. I remember when I was a junior in high school when my family moved up.
If I'm being honest, man, most of my life was pretty happy-go-lucky. You know, and having that stuff happen made you value good things. More made you more grateful and humble.
To the suburbs. I had been good for a minute, but folks still expected me to act out, to be violent. I admit, I enjoyed being a part time gangster. After all, I was.
So I was always a class clown, like always. Like it wasn't time. At one point, before I became a singer, I was going to be a comedian. I've always acted though. So at one point, um, so yeah, I was funny, man. You know, the funny hood rich kid, and then the funny uh, upper middle class income guy.
Was from the hood, but in the suburbs, I was different. I was considered a genius in the hood, but a rebel in the suburbs. I loved the feeling of going from a school.
I was smart everywhere. Um, it's smart as a curse, man, because I've always had a sharp tongue. I've always known how to talk people in or talk people out of stuff, ever since I was a kid. So I always stuck out. And then I was 6 foot tall, 6'2" by the time I was 14, so, and it was no going back after that.
With metal detectors to walking in with no suspicion. People from the hood, they say, never really leave the hood, but I was out. I was.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest moment when we moved to a new school that we knew we weren't in the hood anymore because we literally were looking for the metal detectors until we probably for 20 minutes were looking to see if we went through the wrong door or not. When my mom came with me to school for the first time and there weren't any metal detectors.
Gone, man. I was traveling all over the city.
We were proud, you know, uh, proud to leave. Still had that old house and the house I grew up in. But we had this bigger house, man. We went from a 1 bedroom, 3 bedroom, no garage, just a driveway, to a 4 bedroom, 3 bathroom, 3 car garage on a quarter or a half acre. So it was big difference, big difference.
And then the world. It was a freedom I never thought I'd have. It felt like the weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I went from.
It was a beauty to it, right? It was like getting the chance to. I even remember like not even um like we didn't even tell anybody we was moving that we had neighbors. We weren't in good terms with any of our neighbors in the hood anyway, but we didn't tell them, man. Um, I remember most of the stuff we just packed up, put it in the trunk. Um, and then the stuff like her keepsakes we put in the trunk and clothes. But everything else we just left there, you know. Bought everything. My mom brought everything with her.
House parties that ended in gunshots to kicking it with my boys, mudding and drinking natty light on a boat.
Yeah, that was a big eye opener, because I've always had like ethnic friends. I just never just had black friends. But it was always that kicker when people saw where I lived, and this and I don't know, it was just different, man. You can't really explain that part.
I learned that people are people, no matter where they come from. I was living my best life and can't nobody tell me otherwise. But let me tell you something. When I said that, I knew I was lying to myself.
See that's the one thing that's different from the hood from the suburbs, man. Is that in the hood you know exactly who's the gangster of the group, who's the killers of the group. who's the gang bangers of the group. You know who everything is. But in the suburbs, there it wasn't policed. So you didn't have to really worry about doing anything criminal and getting caught for it unless somebody called the police. You know what I'm saying? Or unless you were driving drunk. Now those are the two things like that you really had to worry about being policed on. But you weren't just going to walk down the street and get pulled over. Just, but it was unheard of. Like you weren't going to have to deal with that type of stuff.
I thought I was free, but I was wrong. I could never step a foot in my house without being belittled.
But that was the biggest part, man. Like it was brutal, man. Like I couldn't. I didn't have an opinion. I couldn't have an opinion that wasn't with them. Um, Part of me is grateful that they were so cruel because I haven't met anyone more cruel than them yet. I've had people that have their little snippets, but uh, I'm grateful to a certain extent to have never met somebody as cruel and as ugly as my mother and sister up until this point. You know,
My sister and my mother's voices were always in my head, taunting me, making me feel worthless. Imagine your mother calling you fat, ugly, and worthless. They were always there,
yeah, I would
lurking,
get called
waiting for
every
me to
name in
make
the
a mistake.
book, man. And the crazy part about it is like you would imagine like my mom is some like ghetto old lady or something. Not at all. Double master's degree, speaks very eloquently, same as my sister. So you wouldn't. We were the uppity Negroes in the hood. So it was like it wasn't expected. So you just imagine these highly intelligent people, very strategic. You know, watching every move I make, waiting for every chance to pounce. Man, it was just brutal. It made me tough though. You know, and it prepared me to keep going, which was the flower in the attic, man.
Back when I was just a youngin', I had to learn to take care of myself. Barely 6 years old, I was already doing things most kids don't. I learned to read when I was 2. I learned to cook.
So like I learned all this stuff when I was super young. I didn't do it because I was just smart and wanted to learn it. I did it because I had to. You know, um, I had to learn it. My mom worked as an RN from 5 o'clock in the morning to 8, 9 o'clock at night sometimes. So we didn't get dinner 9 or 10 o'clock at night sometimes. Um, so it wasn't because I was super smart or whatever. It was because I had to. I had to. And if I wanted clean clothes for school the next day, if she came home, she put them in the washer at 10:30, 11:30 at night. And then by the time she would get up, she would either forget to put them in the dryer or I would put them in the dryer. So what would be the point? So I would just put the clothes in the washer, put the clothes in the dryer. And when I was tired, when I was old enough to put the stuff in, old enough to reach the label, I did it. Um, Same thing with cooking. If I wanted to eat, and that's how I really got so fat too. Was that nobody told me what I could and couldn't eat, and I was at a very young age, 5 or 6 years old. I was eating as many chicken nuggets as I felt like. I was eating as much macaroni and cheese as I felt like. I was drinking as much soda as I felt like. Nobody told me how much I could and couldn't have. Uh, and as long as I left enough for her to have some when she got home, there wasn't any problems, you know.
And did my own laundry by 5 or 6. I was taking care of my household. I was a man before I even knew what a man was.
So I was defending my house. I mean, at an early age, man. Like I mean, I can't even fathom. I mean, the first few fights I had in my life that were bloody, where I was 7, 8 years old. Where I was bloody in cat's nose and this crazy stuff. And I remember my sister; she had a gun by the time I was, uh, 10. Maybe a little younger than that. about 9 or 10, she had a gun. She had a little 9 millimeter. She showed me how to use it, and I learned how to use guns from my uncle. My uncle showed me how. I started with BB guns. I had a rifle BB gun. I had a handgun BB gun, and then I had a bow and arrow. So I learned how to use this stuff really early. So by the time I was 12, I had shot, I don't know, thousands of rounds in different stuff. So I knew how to protect myself in that way.
On weekends when my mom and my sister were off, I cooked dinner for all of us. I was watching Emerald and Bobby Flay before it was popular.
So yeah, I was. The Food Network has been out for about 30 years, and I remember watching the first seasons of this stuff that you see, like Beat Bobby Flay and all that stuff. Now, Beat Bobby Flay didn't come out until like the early 2000s, but I was watching this stuff, just learning how to cook, knowing what the right temperatures were, because nobody was teaching me how to cook. My sister taught me how to cook scrambled eggs, and then I had to learn how to fry chicken. And then those were the first things I learned how to cook was scrambled eggs, fried chicken, and then I learned how to cook pork chops. And then once that was done, I mean, you learn the basics. Then that was that. Um, we did a lot of frozen food until I learned how to completely cook for myself because she was afraid that I might burn the house down because I would forget it. But I was a very responsible kid, very responsible.
I was good pretty fast, but my mom, who couldn't cook herself, got jealous. Next thing I knew,
That was the hard part. Was that I couldn't out achieve my mom. It wasn't okay for me to out achieve her. You know, uh, if it was a competition in the house, that if if she couldn't be the best cook, then nobody could cook, and then she would start just naturally starting stuff, man, like nonstop.
I was getting yelled at and screamed at over the smallest mistakes. No room for errors. They beat me till I was big enough to fight back.
Yeah, that was the killer. Um, my mom didn't beat me as much. My mom beat me up maybe twice in my life, and I would say one was for sure I deserved it. And but the other one, it was I got in trouble at school, but and I just never really got in trouble at school because they understood. I, I just I just never got in trouble. But my sister, man, uh, she would beat me with sticks, with bats, you name it, man. Kick me in the balls and as many times as she could. The last time she fought me was when my punches got strong enough to actually stop her, and that was when I was about 12 years old. That's when I got as big as her. I think my sister's height is like 5'6" or something, and I was 5'5", 5'6" at 11 or 12 years old, and my strength had reached her strength at least, so it was enough for her to for never it was enough for her to think twice about fighting me again. So that was the last time she got physical. And if I'm honest with you, man, I wish she would have stayed at the physical point because the poking for the weak spots, man, was brutal.
They wouldn't stop until I either cried or threatened them. But one day I had enough. I refused to cook for them anymore, and I stopped eating with.
So this was like years later, right? I didn't get good at cooking until I was about 18 or 19. Now I was better than them at cooking by the time I was 11 or 12. But I didn't get good at cooking until I was like 18 or 19. That's when I would ask my mom to buy stuff from the store and she would get it, or she would let me use her credit card to go buy stuff so I could cook dinner. Because all we would eat is uh, is spaghetti. She only knew how to make spaghetti and pork chops. That's all she knew how to make. Anything that was in the pot roast, so she would just throw it in there, throw some water in there, throw some meat, and just turn it on, and then that's what we would have for dinner. And sometimes it was good because it was so bland that you could just add whatever you wanted to it. Like cheese and ranch and extra salt and all that stuff.
Them. And that's when things went from bad to worse. They started calling me names, making fun of me for hours on end. The
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just making fun. They would even call me nigger, like not nigga, nigger. Um, My sister called me a faggot. I mean, you name it. Um, my mom called me pig boy whenever if I and then she would start snorting at me, like start doing that. And she did that for a few years until I asked her to stop. I asked her nicely though, and she stopped. Um, but yeah, but my sister called me a rapist for over a decade. Any chance she got, anytime. I remember one time I ate her mashed potatoes, and it turned into a 45-minute argument. And I was a gay nigger bitch pussy, and called me a rapist, and you name it, man. It was brutal.
Words were like daggers piercing my soul. I could hear them from the bedroom, and it was unbearable. I couldn't take it anymore, so I went out and bought a fan.
So there's two things on this. So I not only I bought a fan to like echo them out, but I was also cleaning my ears with Q-tips. And I wish I would have put this into the actual story, but I was cleaning my ears with Q-tips so much that I lost my hearing by the time I was 25. Not actually, but I lost my hearing by the time I was 25. So I went to the emergency room because when I started chewing, I could hear myself chew. And I was thinking because that's when like headphones, right? The headphones that fit in your ear came out. So I'm thinking I lost my hearing from all the headphones. But come to find out that there was maybe a half an inch worth of cotton in my ears from me cleaning my ears so much from the nervous tick, I guess, from being humiliated so much at that house.
I turned that thing up as loud as it would go, just trying to drown out their voices. But even then, I could still hear them. The words were like poison, seeping into my soul and staining every aspect of my life that seemed to be going halfway decent.
Yeah, I was becoming a different
As
person.
you already know, I couldn't finish high school, but I got my GED and went to community college. I was trying to do right, but trouble always seemed to follow me. To protect my home, I ended up pointing a gun at somebody. They didn't see it that way.
So again, I learned how to use a gun at about 8 or 9 years old. I learned how to use a gun, um, and I knew the safety precautions for it. But I was in college, and I mean, this is when the show The OC came out, and I had my preppy white boy best friends, and it was four of us or five of us all together, including me, and we would watch the OC together, and we would watch movies in my house, and they would all come over. We would sneak beer and drink beer. My sister would actually buy us beer and all this other stuff. But one of the guys, it was a twin. The dude got out raped one night, and I mean, I liked the guy, So I'm like, hey, man, you going crazy, man. I need you to leave, bro. You losing it, man. And everybody was like, Will, man, he's losing it, man. You got to kick him out. And he was mad that I wouldn't fight him. I'm like, dude, you just got your teeth fixed. You can barely talk, man. Just go home. So I didn't even point the gun at the guy. I just went and grabbed the gun out of the room, didn't load it, nothing. It was just like, hey, man, you got to go. Never even pointed at him. But after that, news spread around in a small town. It was more than enough for me to look like a piece of shit, I guess, to them, and it was enough ammunition for them to add more injury or add more insult to the fire or add more to the fire.
Way. More ammo to humiliate me. Word got around, and before I knew it, I dropped out of college. Back to square one, just like that. And you know what they say, right? Tell me who you hang out with, and I'll tell you who you are. Well, I was a lost soul, and I was running with the wrong crowd. Big guys tend to hang with.
So I would even say at that point it was even the wrong crowd. It was cats that I knew that would watch my back and wouldn't say certain stuff about me during it. But you also got to understand during this time, I was guilty until proven innocent. I was a rapist. I was a murderer. I was everything that you can think of. And during this time, I was not considered a good person. So it wasn't necessarily just a lost soul. I had nobody. Um, I didn't have my uncle was on my side, and we were really close. But that was it. My uncle was 60 some years old, and I'm 19, 20, 21. So I just didn't have anybody.
each other. That's when I met Bam Bam. This dude was a beast. He was 22.
Bam Bam was a beast. I knew Bam Bam from 17 until he died. Now Bam Bam, I didn't really do anything with Bam Bam until he really was asking me and said he needed somebody to watch his back, you know. So that's what I did. I watched his back.
But he was tall and strong as I was at 17.
And you know, it's funny. We actually got into a fist fight one night. It wasn't even like a crazy one, but I ended up clocking him in the nose, and his nose busted open. So we just kind of laughing about it. But I can tell you, like at one point, me and him was really close, man. There was times where we were about to get into like these. I don't want to say like gang fights. It was like 25 of us versus 25 of other people. It wasn't like over blocks, but it was like a group of people fighting another group of people. And I remember us meeting people at gas stations to go beat up these cats, and just from our size alone, they would go back home, bro. So we never even really had to fight. But they would. I remember them thanking me, man. Was like, man, if you weren't here, man, they would have sledged us with this, did this with that. And I mean, that was just me trying to protect them, you know,
And he was
or
into
at least what I thought.
all sorts of drugs and prostitution more than I've ever seen in the hood.
Yeah, this was being in contact with these guys, man. And you got to understand, in the suburbs, there's not any police, man. So it, unless you're doing something erratic, you don't have to worry about getting pulled over, or unless you're black, you don't have to really worry about being pulled over. So it's quite easy just to move drugs from one place to the next. I even knew people that would like keep drugs in their car and just park it outside in their driveway and just wait and then let somebody just come pick it up and take the keys out and then drive it, you know. So it wasn't like you didn't even have to hide it. It didn't even have to be hidden for the most part.
And me, well, I got mixed up in his business. He made me his driver at first. I was just a young buck. Now,
See, this was the craziest night, not for me ever, but this was the craziest night because this was the first time that I ever saw this much drugs in my life. Like it was legitimately, he grabbed the pills, threw them on the table, and they were still in the bag. And I remember Bam Bam tying them to his thigh.
really understanding the gravity of the situation until Bam Bam got me behind the wheel of his van to go pick up some goods.
He didn't make me get behind the wheel. He asked me to get behind the wheel. Obviously, he has 10,000 ecstasy pills, maybe even 20,000 ecstasy pills. And the crazy part is, if we got pulled over, I would have been the one accountable for it, you know, and I didn't know that at the time.
From a new Colombian Connect in town. And that's when I saw it. And that's when I saw it, man. And that's when I saw it, man. 10,000 ecstasy pills just sitting there. I drove that devil's chariot back like an old lady with a cane, trying not to attract any attention.
Look, when I tell you we went from one suburb to the next suburb, it was a 45-minute drive. I drove 63 miles in a 65, but I acted like nothing was going on, you know. We drove past a couple of cops, you know, but it was just beat up, rusty, dusty, freaking little van. Not little van, but it was like one of them Chrysler vans, you know. This was like 2003, 2004, something like that. I wasn't 21 yet.
But getting out that life wasn't easy, let me tell you. Never really sold anything, but I
Just
was
knowing those people and not knowing the gravity of what they were really doing, you know, and then being young enough to still want to be stupid and be gangsters, what really made it difficult to get out, because there was a lot of respect that came along with knowing those people, you know, and you knew that if you called them for something, they'd be there for it. I even had friends that were at a point of even willing to commit murder for me if I asked them to, you know, because they knew that I was just a solid cat during that time, you know.
definitely the guy to go to.
But yeah, I never, I sold 25 pills one time and I sold a dime bag of weed, bro. I never sold weed. I always connected the right person with the right person and was like, hey, man, you know, hook me up with this or hook me up with that. Give me this, or, you know, hey, next time you got a party, bring me to the party. I'll be your bodyguard or whatever, or something like that. And then that's where I started meeting a lot of friends because the people that I knew in the hood, and then the people that I knew that were selling drugs around my city, they they knew that I was a safe bet because they knew I wasn't gonna tell anybody, and they knew I lived by a stupid ass street code, and I wasn't no street dude.
I left Bam Bam, but I ended up making friends with an illegal immigrant who was tied up with the cartel.
See, I would say his name, but he's still alive and he's actually married in Texas, right? But it was my boy's boy that introduced me. So he introduced me to Simone, and Simone was a part of the cartel. And I wanted to be a drug dealer so bad, but nobody would let me. So he would let me drive, he would let me run drugs from Kansas City to Belton. That's where we was at, and we let me do that. And my other buddy would ride with me. And there was a night that was just crazy, man. We didn't have a license plate. One of the windows was missing. We were driving, speeding down the highway, and I mean, we had to have. Well, I mean, later found out we had like 25 keys of like some meth and 10 keys of this. And it was in a tire and all this other stuff, and driving on the highway without any license plate, without anything on it, man. And I think he gave me $25 to run that, man. I don't even think I got 20. I think he gave me $25 for that, man. I couldn't. I was barely 21.
At first, I was completely innocent, but we became really good friends, and I was introduced to the right people. I didn't want to be involved in anything legal, but I felt like I had to protect my friends.
That's what it
I didn't want.
was, Like it was good to be able to brag about it, man. But it would, and I'll be frank with you, man. During that time, I was an insurance agent for a multi-level marketing company, and if you know, you know, I was selling insurance, man. So I was trying to run my own business and start my own life, and I think that was like the cover up that they wanted to use for it. But yeah, I had my life insurance license at that time. I was a life insurance producer. Didn't sell not one lick of insurance though. But I wish I tried my best though, bro. 21, 22, try to sell insurance.
Them to get hurt, so I went along with it, even though I didn't want to. It was damn near impossible to leave that life behind, but somehow, by the grace of God, I made it out alive.
See, it wasn't like it was bad because I did so much. It was more because that's all I had, you know. And it was me keeping trying to get away, but I couldn't get away from the people that protected me and made sure that I was safe. So it was like it was a catch 22. The same people that'll make you smile, the same people that'll make you cry.
The last time I saw Bam Bam, that poor guy was wearing a
But
wig.
I will say, up until that point, I've had probably at least 10 or 15 near-death experiences. You know, um, and for me, there wasn't. It's still to this day there isn't a question that God exists. It's not a question in my mind if God exists. It's only a question if He hears me or not. You know.
Wire trying to set me up. And then I heard he
Yeah,
passed
this
away
is
at
funny,
33 from
man.
a heart.
Like he's the one that did the connect. He's the one that met this guy. He's the one that introduced me, and then he decides to wear a wire to try to get me in trouble. And I was 22, 21, 22 at the time. And he called me up and we're just reminiscing. It was like, man, I remember you selling all these drugs and blah, blah, blah. You had all these ecstasy pills. And then I get pulled over. I meet him at this bar. I get pulled over on the drive back to my house, which is less than a mile away from my own home. I get pulled over and the guy's like, hey, man, we need to check your car for ecstasy pills. I'm like, no, you're not checking my vehicle. You don't have my permission. So they tried to talk me into doing it. Doing, you need to cooperate. I'm like, no, man, you're not checking my vehicle. And at this point, I knew the law a little bit, right? Not enough, not as well as I do now, but I knew the law a little bit. And I mean, obviously, I put two and two together, so I called Bam Bam. I'm like, Bam Bam, were you wearing a wire? He was like, man, they got me, man. Blah blah blah. I'm sorry to throw you under the bus. I was like, hey man, this relationship is over, And he said he understood, but we kept in touch, but just never anything like hooking people up with other people. And I just told people what I thought he was, a snitch.
Attack. I don't think it was an accident.
Yeah, there's no way it was an accident. He, um, our my buddy that's the cook, and I'm still know the guy. You know that he used to do what he used to do, and he's in Kansas City now. And I talked to him. I'm like, hey man, like, what did you guys do something? And he was like, Will, I can't confirm or deny. I can't confirm or deny. I'm like, damn, bro. I said, you know, because I said, you know, he's a snitch, and he was like, yeah, I know, man. And yeah, we talked about it. I saw him at a bar one night. We just talked it up, and he's one of those guys that don't want anybody knowing what he does, like as far as he's concerned. And for me, that was the secret. We always kept that secret. And I always, whenever I needed to call him, if I needed anybody or any money or anything, if I could get in contact with him, he would give me whatever money I asked, $100 here, not anything crazy, $100 here, $100 there, sometime. You know.
My immigrant boy, he met his end in a shootout not
So
long
yeah,
after
this
that.
is Simone, man. Simone, the cartel shot his house up, and they didn't call the police or anything, and they weren't even trying to kill him. From what he was telling us, it was just they shot it up to let him know that he's on their watch list, and then yeah, a couple of years later he passed. Yeah,
It's a damn shame, man. But I'm thankful I made it out alive. And I ain't gonna lie, I deserve some of the stuff that came my way because I was still acting.
yeah. Man, if that girl wouldn't have said what she said, man, I probably would have been in. I was going to college. I would have went to MU or Warrensburg or something and moved on with my life, man. I was in FCCLA. I was in Dare. I was in everything you can name, man, for after school curricular volunteering. You name it. But after that, I lost the enthusiasm to even want to go to college.
Like I ain't know nothing about life. Death wish, I guess. I met this girl. She was a stripper. I fell in love with her.
Yeah, the stripper girl was, and I call her exotic dancer, but her name was Ryan, and she looked just like old girl off Excuse Me Miss. Beautiful braces, weird teeth, but still a pretty smile, And we're just chopping it up one day, and we're just chopping it up one day, having a small conversation, and I tell her how I feel about her. I tell her I want her to be my girlfriend, and she was like, "No, I can't do that." And then she says, "Come visit her at work," and I'm like, "All right." And she goes, "I'm working at a strip club." I go, "Okay, you a host?" She's like, "No." I said, "So, are you a bartender?" She's like, "Uh." I said, "So what are you doing?" She says, "Well, I'm dancing." Oh, okay. And you should come up and see me. So I came up and see her. We chopped it up. Nothing came from it. She was actually mad that I didn't spend money when I came up there. I'm like, I'm not doing that crap. You need to find somebody else that's willing to do that stuff for you. And then one day, I really liked her, and she asked me to be her daddy. I'm like, and at first I was like, what do you mean, your daddy? She's like, yeah. She's like, I need two. I got two other friends that need a man to protect them and do all this other stuff for us. And I said, yeah. And actually, believe it or not, one of them uh, was one of the biggest black porn stars during that time. But she wasn't. She was embarrassed. She would come in and out of town. Um, but if I said her name, you'd 100% know who she was.
So I tried to protect her. It ended up becoming some kind of pimp for her and her friends. It broke my
Now, I
heart.
will say this shit lasted like 6 months, man. The first time I really saw her like do something like in front of me, I was like, no, I can't do this. It was cool when I was exchanging it with my boys, and I would have them meet with people and all that stuff. But when I saw her do the act, and at this point, we didn't even do anything physical, you know. I could have done stuff physical, but I didn't want to do anything physical with her. I wanted her to myself, you know.
I couldn't stand watching her do that, so I left. By then, I was already caught up in some mess. I knew I was losing my mind. It felt like the whole world was against me. On my 22nd birthday, I was leaving the club when two other cars tried to pull me off the road. To get away, I cried.
Yeah, so this part was crazy, man. Like literally my 22nd birthday, June 4th, man, 2006, I think. Something like that, man. It was I'm coming from a club. I'm driving my mama's car. My mama's $50,000 uh, Lincoln Continental Regatta edition, man. She just paid it off. It was like in 1999, 2000, or something like that. It was 98 or 99. She had just paid it off. I mean, this car was clean, man. It was a white with a navy blue rag top. It was with sunroof and heated seats and all that stuff, man. And I'm riding it, uh, driving about 65, 70 miles an hour. I never drive past 70, you know. So I was driving about 65, 70 miles an hour. One car starts pulling up next to me, starts trying to swerve me off. I start to speed up to try to get past it. It keeps going fast. I slow down, it slows down. I speed up, it speeds up. And then the other car comes next to me and it starts speeding up, trying to go past me. And I was noticing they're trying to get me to get off the road. So I'm trying to swerve to get away from them. I hit the gas, lose it, pow, crash into the wall about 85 miles an hour. They said I should have died that night. I remember getting hit by the ambulance, or when that. Well, I remember hitting the pillar, and the ambulance guy was like, "You can't go to sleep tonight because you might have a concussion and you could die." And I left with that. I mean, the car was totaled, man, and I had nothing but a scratch on my either left or right eye. I can't remember. It was bleeding, but it was because I hit my head on the windshield, and I think it was just because I was too heavy. The reason I didn't get thrown through the windshield. But yeah, I should have died that night. You know. Yeah, that car was totaled, man. Yeah, it was the the engine almost dropped through. That's how total the car was.
Crashed into a concrete pillar on the highway at 85 miles per hour. Car was totaled. All I got from that accident was a scratch on my eye. All I got from that accident was a scratch on my eye from almost flying through the windshield. I still don't know how I didn't die right then and there. But if I'm being honest with you, I don't know how I'm still alive to this day.
Yeah, many times.
Skipping ahead a few years, and I'm back drinking and getting stupid.
So I sobered up after my 22nd, man. Like I didn't drink from uh, 22 to 25. I was going to school. I was going to business school. This is when online stuff had just started getting popular, you know. And I was going to school, and I was working at Mimi's Cafe of all places, believe it or not. And I wasn't even associated with anybody doing anything like that, you know. But I was still fat, and I'm fat now, but it's a difference. Like I was still fat. I was still living in that house, and I still had a big dream of going to California, man. So it was like I was living a nightmare and I didn't know it, because I was actually even working at Mimi's so I could transfer to California, but my general manager wouldn't let me. He kept kind of prolonging it because he liked how hard I worked.
Drunk again. I was out there in the streets, running through about 5 red lights.
And I wasn't running the streets, but I was out there, like going out every Friday, Saturday night. This night in particular, I was drinking like some cheap liquor, man. It was vodka, and man, I was wilding, man. I really was. I was with one of my buddies. In the suburbs, there's not a lot of black people that hang around, and the ones that do hang around, y'all clink onto each other, y'all clash on, y'all clink onto each other, And yeah, man, we got hammered. I'll never forget wearing that red sweater, man. And I was flying. I didn't care, bro. I was running through every red light and not even realizing that the cops were following me for like 15 minutes, man. They had me footage. I mean, dead to rights. They legitimately 5 to 8 lights or something like that, but at least 5 lights. I don't know how many more was that, but for sure 5 lights.
When those Red and blue lights start flashing. The cops pulled me over and they hit me with the taser, but it didn't even faze me. That's
Yeah, I got hit. They hit me twice, if not three times. They tried to break the window out. They couldn't break the window out. They tried to get me out the car. My seatbelt was stuck to the car, and I was too big. I wasn't fighting them back. They couldn't. They could barely get my arms around my back. I was fighting them on that. And then I ended up chewing on the taser, which was the crazy part. I was chewing on the taser, and yeah, I chewed on the taser while they were trying to tase me.
when I overheard them talking about hanging me, man. I was scared.
And now you understand these were good old folks. These was country boys. And you got some black dude running through they stop line or they stop signs and stop lights and not caring who he hits and all this other stuff. They were legitimately considering hanging me. Um, I remember telling them I didn't care, do it. And I think the only reason they didn't is because I was too heavy. I really do. I think that's the only reason that they didn't.
For my life, but somehow, some way, I was able to use my words to talk them down. That experience made me feel like I was untouchable. You know what I'm saying? And what do untouchable people do? More dumb stuff. Years went by, and
Steroids was, yeah, man. I did 1.5 cc's for 6 months, I think. Decatone, testosterone, and I was using a 1.5 inch needle, man. Yeah, yeah, and a cc and a half every week for about 6 months, man. I got huge. And during that time, I lost like 160 pounds on steroids. I was 440. I went down from 440 around 280.
I started shooting up steroids. I lost around 160 pounds and got swole as hell. Picture this. I'm a 6'3", 275.
Now I had the fat boy six pack. I didn't have the chiseled six pack. I had what he got. I had that, but with fat around it. Like you couldn't see the what's that little the Orion's belt or whatever that's called, but you could see everything else. And but it was a lot of fat around the lower part, like the bottom pieces of it.
Pound with a six pack.
But yeah, I did have 24, 25 inch biceps. I still got really big biceps right now, so I still have really big arms, really big muscular arms, and really big muscular shoulders.
The people I knew and the connections I had made me a local celebrity in my city. I was getting free food, free drinks, free.
Yeah, I went from hood rich to suburban rich to city known, man. Just from the people I met through that time, man, and I was just and the stuff that just the loyalty that I had to people was really what made me kind of stand out, man. And during that time, I was very, very good at picking up women. Especially even when I was overweight, super overweight. It just took longer to get them, but I was very seductive, very seductive.
Bottles everywhere I went.
Now I need to put emphasis on that I've been getting free food and free drinks most of my life, but it went from like one to like a million after that. It was like, man, like how did this dude go from like I mean I legitimately I think for like 5 or 6 years I didn't have to pay for liquor or food when I went out.
We partied with some of the cheerleaders, the Chiefs, and the Royals on a regular basis.
Now, how I ended up hooking up with like professional athletes was that my teacher in high school was an ex KC cheerleader. And we ended up fooling around like when I was like 21, 22 years old. She told me she wouldn't mess with me while I was still underage. So when I turned 21, she chomped down. So we went out, we spent time together. And when we would go out, I would obviously get free drinks wherever we went. I didn't get free bottles all the time, but I would get free bottles every now and again. And there's been times where she would bring out 25 of her her cheerleader friends that were Chiefs cheerleaders, and it would we would get bottle service, you know. And I'd be one of the only guys there, if not one of the few guys there, you know.
I always had some famous friends, but this was on another level.
So locally famous. Only had a few. I only knew people that knew people, So I had the luxury of meeting famous people. But this was Kansas City, man. This wasn't like people were. coming from all over to come here and party. It was just certain people that came out, and I had the luxury of meeting.
I was on top of the world, man. We were untouchable. Shoot, even had some cops in my circle until that one night that tore us apart.
So
Me and
so again, a small town, man. So I had I had cop friends in the suburbs from what I had to go through with my mom and my car being blown up. And then I had friends from the city because of the connections that I had doing there. But just to give you an idea of how connected I was with the police, that I got pulled over for a DUI and I didn't even get the DUI. The cop waited for me to call somebody to come pick me up instead of giving me the DUI because he knew who I was and we were cool. So the cop literally waited there an hour and a half until my little brother, quote, my little fake brother, play brother, Mike came and picked me up. And they literally drove my car home, drunk off my ass. And I mean, I was literally, man, I was going 25 miles on the highway, and I couldn't even drive straight. That's how drunk I was. I'm not proud of what I did. I'm just giving you an example.
my athlete boys hit the town for a night out. It was perfect.
So I had professional friends that were athletes. I had professional friends that were college athletes, right? And I had some of my friends actually won like KU Warrensburg championship. So this is times where they either just won the year before or won that year. So I was celebrating with people at their best, at their peak performance. So it was this was pinnacle stuff, man.
It was perfect. Everyone had a girl who was down to hook up. As usual, we got in the club for free. We had free drinks, bottles, and food.
So my buddy was really close with a lot of the girl college sports. So we had one night we had I man it had to be at least 50 or 60 girls with us. But mind you, we had the girls from the college basketball come out. We had girls from college volleyball come out. We had girls from college baseball come out. So we had all of these girls come out and party with us. And most of these women were very attractive, at least in body, just being honest, right? Um, and it was yeah, it was crazy.
Free world. As we're leaving,
And this was at the point where I was really good friends with a lot of general managers because of the people that I knew and the impact that I brought when I went out. So they would invite us to the parts of these clubs, man. We wouldn't have to pay anything to get into these clubs. So like it was literally like I was some rapper, man. So we didn't have to pay for anything, pay free access, free bottles, free liquor, free tables. The only thing was always stipulated was that we would pay the girls $100 for the bottle service, for one of their tables. But otherwise, we didn't have to pay anything. And if we didn't want a table, they would just give us a bottle. We walk around with the bottle.
out of nowhere, the, as we're leaving out of nowhere, the shots start raining down on us.
So this was the time when "Look at Me Now" came out, and we were mocking some hood cats. Um, I mean, these guys, man, had the baseball cap on, too big of the white t-shirts, pants sagging. They weren't going to get into the club, bro. And I'm dressed to the letter, suit jacket, suit dress shirt, nice jeans, nice dress shoes, earrings, all this stuff. I'm dressed to the letter, and we mocking them. How you out in the club? You can't even get in. And so he was like, so they got jealous for sure. They got jealous, and yeah, I mean, you got to imagine like us walking in with all these girls, bro. All these girls, short skirts on, beautiful, tall. Everybody wants to talk to them.
It wasn't my first time in a shootout, but it was my first time I was the target. I ain't backing down now.
At this point, I had enough. Like we were at a spot, and we literally walked out. Not even 30 seconds after we walk out, they start shooting us. All my friends dug down, but I had enough, man. Everybody's like, "Get down, Will, get down." I was like, "Nah, man, fuck these motherfuckers, man." And I started walking towards the guy that that the guys that were shooting. They were shooting behind the car, and one of it was either a cop or an off-duty cop, but he had an actual gun. He pointed the gun in my head and said, "Hey, man, you need to go and hide behind one of those cars." I was like, "Man, I'm sick of these motherfuckers, man." He's like, "I get it, man, but you got to go, man. Just be safe." And put your stuff back there. And yeah, that was that night. But that night, yeah, my buddy got hit 2 times. My boy Juan, my best friend's best friend.
I walked up close to them fools who were busting shots. An officer behind the wall had his gun aimed straight at my head until he realized who I was. He told me to hide, but I wasn't having it. I had enough. Maybe I'm reckless. Maybe it was the alcohol talking, or maybe it was something else. In the end, one of my boys got hit 2 or 3 times in the chest, but he pulled through. The rest of us walked away without a scratch. Man, my life was all messed up. The world outside was crazy and wild, and inside, I couldn't find a minute of peace. I was still living with my mom in the suburbs while all this was going on. At home, they were doing and saying the worst things you could do or say to a person. The lie about me raping that girl was still haunting me.
Yeah, they used that girl um, for over a decade to humiliate me over, And when I got baptized, I was 26, I think. Um, and that's when my mom found out I was a virgin when I was accused of that stuff. And I mean, it stopped any normal relationship that I would have had with any woman at that point.
My mom and my sister just assumed I was guilty, and that was all the excuse they needed to unleash their hate on me for all these years. But I wasn't taking their abuse lying down anymore. I was done trying to prove them wrong. I told them straight up, if they ever disrespected me again, I was going to beat them until they were knocked out.
So at this point, man, my mom was already in Texas because she realized that I was telling the truth about me being a virgin. So she kind of like she tucked her legs in because she wouldn't admit that she was doing me dirty. But my sister, she wasn't. She didn't care. She was like, I want you gone, bro. I want you gone. And I remember looking up at the stairs and I said, if you ever call me out my name again, I said I'm gonna kill you. And and she said, if you come up here, if you touch me, I'm gonna call the cops. I said, bitch, how the fuck you gonna get to the phone? And yeah, that was that.
My sister threatened to call the cops on me, but I dared her to try, asking her how the hell she was going to make it to the phone. I ain't proud of what I said, but
I am proud. Yes, yeah, I am proud. It's not. I wish I wouldn't have had to get to that point because um, my mom and my sister were goofballs. And I really truly wish that they forgave themselves enough to forgive me. Yeah, if that makes sense. Like it's not. I'm not angry that they tried to do it. I just don't care. You didn't win. You didn't beat me. So I'm not mad that they did it. It's just like I missed out on getting to see my sister become a better person. And I mean, I hope they're better. I don't really talk to them on that level, but I wish there was a relationship that they were willing to try to fix. But I'm not. I didn't break it, so I'm not the one that has to buy it.
I was tired, man. They were turning me into a damn monster.
Yeah, I was. I really was, man. Like I was. I would walk around, man, just punching people in the face at one point. If I went out, if somebody said anything to me, I would just punch them and laugh about it. I was really turning into a monster, man. And in the later videos, I'll talk about some of the stuff that I did, man. That was just atrocious. You know, um, that I can't fully blame somebody else for doing because it was my own doings. But yeah, man, like one wrong move, man, during that time changes everything.
Somehow it worked. The insults and mistreatment slowed down a little bit. Yeah, I know it's a cliche,
I had a small point piece.
but after I was so lost, I found God. I really wanted to change my life for real. I didn't like the person I had.
This was the day after Christmas 2009 or 2010 that I go inside and get baptized, and I asked them to come and see me. You know,
Turned into, and I knew it wasn't too late for me to flip the script. The day of my baptism rolled around, and I was hyped to share that moment with my fam. I thought I could get them to love me again, but neither my sister nor my mom showed up or supported me. Instead,
I mean, literally, my sister slept in. My mom didn't show up. Nothing. Didn't even call to congratulate me.
I overheard my sister telling my mom, God forgives you, but we don't. They didn't care about my faith.
Yeah. At that point, I was sick of them, man. Because I didn't get baptized for them, but it was to the point of like, man, like how much more am I going to have to take over something that I didn't even do, man? You know, guilty until proven innocent.
They didn't care about me. They never did. I couldn't take it
Yeah.
anymore. So I screamed at the top of my lungs.
I was in my room. In fact, I remember being on the phone with my best friend at the time. He was like, Will, you just got to say it. Because they knew, you know, like my friends knew that I didn't do it. I told them what happened. I told them that I was a virgin and shit, but I didn't tell my mom for maybe at least 7 or 8 years. I was 26. It happened when I was 18. I didn't say anything until I was about 26, 27.
I was a virgin when that happened. I was hoping that could put that mess behind us, that they would believe me.
Yeah, I mean, and if you ask, why didn't I say anything sooner? I did. I told them I didn't do it. And I remember one day I asked her, I said, you don't really think I did something like that to those girls, do you? And it was plural at that point because the two girls that said I sexually harassed, or the three girls that said I sexually harassed them, and then one girl that said I raped her. And I said, you don't really believe I would do that to those girls. And she says, I don't know, but I wouldn't put it past you. And that was the last time we really talked about it.
That they would show me some love. But instead, they just looked at me and said, nobody would believe you anyway.
So that nobody would believe me anyways was more supposed to mean that nobody would believe the stuff that they were doing to me. Not nobody would believe that I was a virgin, you know. And nobody really did believe I was a virgin because I turned down so many women. And at that point, you know, I had more people thinking I was gay than thinking I was a rapist, you know, because I kept turning down these beautiful women, but I was terrified to have sex, man. I mean, absolutely terrified. I mean, terrified. Um, Now, terrified.
As if it had somehow made their behavior okay. I stuck with them for 3 more years, but I was feeling like I wanted to end it all.
Yeah, I was ready to go. I mean, I at that point, I felt worthless, you know. Um, I barely was even, I was living in my own mother's house and we were barely even speaking. I think I spoke to her while I was living there. We spoke twice in like 7 years. We didn't talk. My sister, my sister, we barely spoke at all. And they were so cruel to me, man. Like I don't even know how they did it, but somehow they managed to cut the heat off from the basement where I was living and make sure to keep it on upstairs where she was living because they wanted to cold me out, man. They didn't want to deal with it.
To end my life for good. The only thing that kept me going was the thought that they would never get their hands on my insurance money. For years, I was trying.
So she didn't admit that for years they would not admit. I'm like, and I said it to them for years. I know you guys are trying to kill me. I just can't prove it yet. I know you guys are trying to set me up to do some stuff. I just can't prove it yet. Because even her boyfriends, like my sister's boyfriend, one of them, actually two people came up and talked to me, but one of them was like, Will, man, you need to get out of here. They don't want you. They don't want you here. I was like, what do you mean? I'm like, dude, I barely even know you. They was like, man, they wanted me to do some stuff to you. I don't want to say, but and I'm like, who? My sister? I was like, my sister, fuck that bitch. You brush it off, but then you start looking back, and then this is the
I was trying to
crescendo.
convince my friends and family. They didn't care, and the ones that did,
I had people. There was people that I had that knew that something was off with my sister and mom. They just didn't care. They didn't care, and my friends that did care, just what could they do? Nobody believed that these women would have was planning my death. You know.
left. The last time I saw my sister, I was broke and jobless, and asked her
Now, look, when I say broke, I mean broke. I was donating plasma for $40 every 2 days. $20 the first day, $40 the second day. Every 2 days just to be able to have something to eat. I was still getting free food and free liquor when I went out, but I still had to get gas. I still had to get this stuff, you know. So it was I when I say that I don't know how I survived on $60 a freaking week, man. You know, my mom would send me $50 every 2 weeks, you know, via check. But I don't know how I have no idea how I made it that long with that little bit of money.
for $3 to go get some
And I did that for like 2 years.
hot dogs at the gas station. She pulled the money out and put it back in her purse, but instead of giving me the money, she
Like literally. Like I go up and I mean I'm drained out. And she goes, I go, hey Tiff, man, would you mind giving me $3 or $4 so I could go get some hot dogs at Quick Trip? And I remember saying, I don't like your enthusiasm. I was like, hey, can I get $3 to go to Quick Trip? And I say something smart because I end up hooking up with this girl the night before. I say something smart, and then she pulls the money out, and she was like, "Well, come back in 24 hours, and I'll give it to you."
made me wait 24 hours. By then, I hadn't eaten in 2 days, and I was at my breaking point. I was starting to become what the
Now you got to understand something. I would now she'll owe me nothing. Let's not forget that part. But I was snotting out my nose at this point. I'm crying. I'm yelling at her at the top of my lungs. And we finally had the conversation. The conversation that I knew that she wasn't willing to admit for the last 10 years.
accused me of. I was starting to think maybe they're right about me. That's when we had our final fight. And she finally admitted everything. That she wanted me to be a killer, like my father, or die. Win-win situation.
So there was two things. They wanted to make my life so miserable that I killed myself. And then once they realized they couldn't get me to do that, then they started looking for people to hire, quote unquote. And I can't prove the other one. But I've talked to guys that told me that, and I talked to some of the people that kind of felt like that they were kind of um, checking around to see who they could hire because I was worth a quarter million, $500,000 dead, you know. Um, so that's the kill me part, right? So one guy came up to me and told me flat out that they had planned on doing something, but it was admitting something without admitting it. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't that. It was the stuff, you know, you go, oh, no way. I mean, you don't believe some random dude that comes up and tells you
At
that.
that point, I was ready to take her life. The same way she had tried to take mine.
Well, and here's the thing, like she knew and she almost had a smile on her face. Not almost, she had a complete smile on her face. When she was telling me this stuff. It was like she was proud of what she did. And she was proud that she did it. And we were talking about all this stuff. Like I protected my sister for most of my life. You know, I had her back, and she's been planning this for the last decade to make my life as miserable as possible. And the real fight was because I took the lower room, I took the basement room, and she wanted it for herself because she was the older child, and I didn't, and I helped, but she didn't help us move. She's been arrested, God know how many times, all this other stuff. She was the bad person, and she was the bad kid of the family, point blank. And I was the goody two shoes.
I didn't want to be like them, so I knew I had to get out. But she left that night, and I left the
She knew, and I'll be honest with you, she knew. She knew if she would have stayed that night, I probably would have crossed the line and probably would have killed her because she told me everything. She told me that she would have forgiven me if I would have just admitted to raping those kids or raping those girls.